I'd like to call the meeting to order and like to acknowledge that the town of Comox respectfully acknowledges that we're standing on the unceded traditional territory of the Comox First Nation, and call the meeting to order. Also notices given that at 6 p.m. we're going to be having a public hearing considering the rezoning application RZ 18-10. That's at 1974 Bolt Avenue. We do have a few introduction and approval of late items. The agenda has been amended to include the following items: a delegation from Haley Dewhurst from the Comox BIA regarding an upcoming street closure. So, second, and any questions on that? All in favor? And that is resolution to exclude the public in accordance with section 19(1)K of the community charter. Second. All in favor? Okay, great, thank you. And adoption of the agenda, that the July 14th regular council meeting agenda be adopted as amended. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. And we welcome Haley Dewhurst. And Haley, you're always a pleasure to have you here. So go ahead and have your say there. You have 10 minutes and then there'll be questions.
Does that work? Okay. All right. Hello, my name is Haley Dewhurst, and I'm here to represent the Downtown Comox BIA, as most of you in the room know that. Thanks again for squeezing me in, but the next meeting was going to be a little short notice. We're excited to announce that we can host our sidewalk sale block party fest. We're still trying to figure out the name on that on Saturday, August 21st. And we're working directly with local health authority and our businesses to ensure to offer a safe and family-friendly event. For the event, we're planning to encourage our retailers to host their end of summer sales, invite nonprofits and select booths to set up along the street, including Comox Rec, and provide entertainment as well as family activities throughout the day. In order to give the space that we need, we're requesting to close Comox Avenue from Port Augusta Street to Norden Street, leaving accesses to all the mall entrances and for all the residents to get in and out of their homes. And we're planning to have an active closure from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. So we're asking the street to be closed from 8 a.m. to 6 p.m. to provide for setup and takedown. We're also here to ask if there's a possibility to have the town of Comox provide the necessary barricades to do that safely. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer questions. It's a quick one.
Great, thanks, Haley. Does council have any questions? Councillor Bissinger and then Grant.
Sure, yeah, thanks. I'm super stoked to hear this. I guess to staff, can we vote on this right now, or do we have to make a motion later?
Maybe let Ken talk. Yeah.
Well, that was actually going to be my question too, was when our next meeting is, because, you know, I mean, I don't imagine anybody's going to say no to this, and there's no point leaving it till next week if we don't have to, or next meeting.
Yeah. Yeah, Nicole.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. I don't know historically, is this the first block party that we've done shutting the roads as far as like the barricade request, or is this something that's happened historically but not the last 2 years?
I think it's happened before my time. This is the first time that I've been involved with doing this.
It has happened in the past. I was on the BIA when we shut it down for an entire weekend to do a ball hockey tournament on the main street. So there is some history there.
Okay, great. So we have experience of what worked and what didn't, but super supportive of it. It sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah, good. Pat, any, do you approve or not? You know, I know you're out there in Nova Scotia, but maybe you have some issues. Okay, so can we move to approve this now? Do you have any concerns with that?
Yeah, generally good principles first heard deferred, but given the time constraints on this, you could look to approve it right now, or you could look at it to the end of your agenda. Either way, you're going to need unanimous consent of council to do so.
Okay, so somebody want to move that?
So with unanimous consent, is that to vote on it, or is that with the vote?
Unanimous consent to vote on it, and then it would be a majority vote to pass.
Okay, so I'll move that we vote on this now.
Second.
Okay. All in favor? All right, that was unanimous.
And then I'll move that we grant the request that we're being asked, including the barricades.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? And that's unanimous. Great.
Awesome.
Thank you very much, Haley.
Awesome.
Appreciate you you coming in.
Okay, thank you so much, you guys, and come down to the event.
Yeah, we'll do
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much.
it. Okay, so next we have Harold Long and Derek Jensen. They're the applicants on 2309 McDonald Road. So gentlemen, I'll give you 10 minutes, and for all the delegations that are standing by, we're going to stick to a strict 10 minutes tonight for each, and then comments after that. So I'm guessing, Derek, you're going to be the one speaking? Oh, you're muted, Derek.
Yeah, thanks, Russ. It'll be both Harold and I kind of
Okay.
teaming up here.
All right. Go ahead.
Well, thanks very much, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so this application primarily stems to the deferral of the significant offsite improvements related to the 2309 McDonald Road development that Council has previously reviewed and approved. Council's obviously well aware of the delays through the approval process that Harold has overcome, let's say, to arrive at where we are today, which is phase one is near completion with construction. Phase two is probably 65% complete. We would be, with approval of this variance today, we would be probably looking for an application for registration of phase one within probably by the end of July. So what we've brought forward today is a request to defer these offsite improvements, primarily in an effort to try and have these 11 lots come on market to builders that have been screaming at Harold for years to get more lots available for their customers. Harold is not in any way planning to circumvent or sidestep his obligation, and frankly this development's obligation as it relates to offsite improvements, but rather this in our minds is a timing issue from the perspective that as indicated, I believe we would be in a position to make application for registration in about a month's time with this approval of this variance. It would probably be sometime late 2021 into 2022 if we have to complete the design and implementation of all of these, and obviously have the town sign off on the construction of all these offsite improvements, which puts us, in high probability have these lots available for market in 2022. So we're looking for council support to accept this variance on the premise that while the offsite works would be delayed, they would certainly be completed, and certainly completed within the next year. You want to add to that, Harold?
Yeah, I mean, basically we're obviously well in progress on phase two. We're just looking for the final approval of construction drawings. We do have a lot of the underground work in the process. The thing that's delayed us here significantly is that getting hydro drawings out, we're still a month away at least on getting those drawings. Thus, it's slowed us down. We can't test in a lot of the lines and that until we can get the hydro underground, so we can bring the water and things like that across in the road network. We're basically pretty well shut down now. We're just doing some testing because we can't proceed much farther without hydro's drawings, which will we do have some temporary power coming to the property for the builders if we can get these registered. And obviously, as you can guess, the builders are waiting to find places to build. There's a severe lot shortage, especially in Courtney Comox, that it's difficult to find anything to build on. We certainly will be proceeding immediately. Basically, as soon as we've got hydro drawings on, we'll be proceeding to finish off the works on the whole subdivision, and hopefully we can we can get enough momentum here to get the pavement done before our winter crunch on that, and get the rest of the thing registered. Basically, our main concern is that we can get these 12 lots registered so that the builders can proceed. Part of our agreement on that with going with phase one, we've agreed that although we can do construction on it, we can't actually sell them or be occupied until we get the paving and curbs in, which just mainly so we're not impacting the existing houses that are there. So it's not as if anybody's going to be using the street until we get the pavement in. All access has to come through the construction access, so we don't disturb the neighbors with dirt and activity on the street. So, but that's our main reason, is basically see if we can get these out as quick as we can.
Yeah, it's a timing issue, council. That's what we're trying to accommodate. If we're successful with this variance, we're optimistic we can have people living in these homes early in the new year. If we're not successful, that would be delayed, 12 months. So we're available for any questions council may have, and thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation.
Great, thank you very much, gentlemen. Does council have any questions? Seeing none, we will be discussing this a little later, so thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Okay, we'll move on to Fred Horn, Art Reitmeyer, and Mark Blandford for Providence Living. Gentlemen, I'll give you 10 minutes and then there'll be questions after that.
Thank you, Mayor and Council, and good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Kelley. I'm a director of Providence Living. In the past, you've from me and our now retired CEO, Jane Murphy. And I wanted to introduce you just quickly before we start off, our new interim CEO, Fred Horn, as well as our project lead, Art Reitmeyer, a principal at Field and Martin, and Sully Vache, who will be our project manager. Just before I turn it over to Fred and Sully and Art, I wanted to thank you and your planning group for your cooperation through the planning and consultation process of this project. Art works with a number of different municipalities in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. And he shared with me that, the level of cooperation, communication, response times with your planning group has just been exceptional. So I just wanted to quickly thank you for that. And I felt you should know that. And we're grateful. I know that you share our goal of ensuring the success of this unique and transformational project. And with that, I will turn it over to Fred.
Thank you, Chris. And Mayor and members of council, I'd also like to thank you for the opportunity to appear, and as well, further to Chris's comments, for the tremendous support that we've received and interest in the community. I won't get into the details, obviously, of the proposal. I'll leave that for your questions. But two things I would like to emphasize. First of all, we're very pleased at the dedications in the proposal that we've been able to work through with town staff. We have a very good understanding now of your vision for the area that along Comox Avenue and on the periphery as well. And we're very pleased that we've been able to work out those dedications and support that vision, and we'll continue to do that as we move through the process. The second thing I wanted to express our appreciation for the recommendation on page 7 of the application for the ability to provide us with the opportunity for a covenant in lieu of the bond that would normally be required. I'm sure that Jane Murphy has talked a bit about in the past about how the project is funded. We're on quite a tight budget. Our capital portion from the Vancouver Island Health Authority actually flows through over time as part of the per diem per resident funding that we receive. And so, in addition to the total amount of capital costs and working within the amount that we've been provided, plus the amount that we're raising, there's some cash flow implications because of the way that that money flows from the health authority as well. So that that potential opportunity, subject to your approval, is very, very important to us, and we do appreciate that you're considering it. So thank you. With that, I'll conclude.
Okay, thanks. Was there anyone else to speak, or you're done with the presentation?
I believe we're done.
Okay, great.
Mayor,
Thank you.
Available for questions, of course.
Does council have any questions? Councillor Grant.
Well, I was just wondering, we're getting a lot of letters from the public still, even to today, about the location that you guys have chosen to put on that site, which is up on the Rodello corner. And I wonder if you could just explain a little bit as to why that building is going in that corner as opposed to something else. People are worried about the view corridor going down there. And of course, when you're sitting on a giant bluff, it's, it's hard to explain that it's a water issue. So maybe you could just give us a little more information on that.
Thank you for the question. I'll pass that to Mr. Reitmeyer if I can.
Sure. Yep. Thank you for the question. Yes, I mean, when we were going through the initial analysis of the site, there was a plan that was developed initially for the building to be up in the northwest corner and sort of wrap around the hospital building, and a couple of significant items came into play. The most significant being the fact that in the northwestmost corner, as you get closer to the actual Comox Street, you're at water table, significant flow at 2 meters down. And 2 meters for this planned village, because we're trying to create a platform that's level in the center for the courtyard for the residents, because of the concept, the unique concept and design of this building, meant that we would have penetrated that and would have had to tank the entire building or come up with some alternative solutions, because the flow through there from the geotechnical reports, and as we moved even further, a bit further to the east, the flow in that area was quite significant and would have required significant solutions to try and resolve how we would deal with the building, given that we were trying to create this level courtyard. So the decision at that time was to study relocating the building over to the eastern side, which was intended down the road for some future development regardless. And so now we've gone to respect the fact that we're closer to the road and where we are relative to the neighborhood and the shoulder elements with residential. We've tried to keep the overall height of the care home quite restricted. And as you can see, even in the staff report, we're well below what would be allowed on the site. We've tried to be very respectful of what's going on in the neighborhood and not to impede too significantly, and respect the fact that at some point there is going to be access to that front. And that's part of the dedications to the walkway and the viewpoint as well. So we're trying to ensure that in as many ways as possible, the balance of the community still has access, and in some ways can access the view to the water as well.
So where's that water coming from? Is it runoff? Is it an underground creek, or is there an aquifer? Or
there's artesian flow as it's defined in the geotechnical report, and it actually comes from north of the property right through and flows down through, down to the bank, I would suspect, because it actually flows right through the property.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks very much.
You're welcome.
So does it actually seep out of the bank? Because I think I have that question too. Like, you get 2 meters down, you have this water that's causing a problem, but it's so close to the bank. Would it not, any pressure, just kind of go off the bank?
Well, we're quite far back from the bank, where we're talking about this, because it was in the northwest corner of the property, and as you move to the south, it basically goes down as well. And it was actually interesting to note that as you went further south in the property, the depths where they encountered water were deeper than where they encountered it at the northwestern piece, which was again the 2 meters, and with significant concern about pressure once it was excavated in that area.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Any other questions for the gentleman? Seeing none. Thank you very much, gentlemen. Appreciate your time on this one.
Welcome.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so next we have the Hearth Patio and Barbecue Association of Canada. I think we've all heard from them over the last year. So Jeff, Lara, and John and others, please go ahead. You have 10 minutes. We're going to stick to that, and then there might be some questions afterwards. So thank you, and go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Arnott, and thank you, councillors. My name is Jeff Lohner. I'm Director of Public Affairs with the Hearth Patio and Barbecue Association of Canada. I'm joined by Laura Litchfield, President, local and regional members, Jamie Payne from Norris Heating, and Corey Iverson, Vice President of Pacific Energy, which employs over 300 people in Duncan, BC, and John Crouch from HPBA, who's a resident wood expert and wood appliance expert, and particularly emissions expert. So we have a group here today which really represents our seriousness as well as our commitment to what's contained in our proposal. I know I sent along a copy of the PowerPoint, but I think I can just speak to it if that's the easiest way, Mayor, rather than bring it up. I don't know what your pleasure is.
Yeah, is council comfortable with that? I think a lot of us have seen it. Yeah, okay, so go ahead.
Oh, yeah, right. So as I think many of you have already heard, because we've presented this to the village of Cumberland, as well as the city of Courtenay and the regional district, and we wanted to make sure that we presented it as well to the town of Comox. Really what we're talking about here is industry's commitment to improve air quality, and we see three pillars to achieve that. The first is what we're calling effectively a woodlot, but access to seasoned, sustainable wood supply. We've been working. Chris Bowen, who is not here, he's had something come up, has been working as well as other members with potential investors on a woodlot, and we're going to continue that work as we move forward. Number one. Number two, we need a well-funded and well-administered exchange program that includes and covers and applies to wood appliances, which is not the case anymore at the regional level, and is one of the reasons we've included that directly in our proposal. And third is we need to ramp up our education efforts. This is something that local members and all Hearth wood appliance manufacturers do. But we wanted to make sure that everybody heard us state that we are committed to, from a resource perspective, as well as an education perspective, backing whatever education programs are needed, in addition to those that are already in place. Finally, I really wanted to get to, I guess, what we're asking for, and so that people understand clearly, councillors and you, Mayor, why we're asking for this. We're obviously potentially at some point going to ask for conversations with officials to work through some of the elements of the proposal, number one. Number two, we haven't included any direct financial or even in-kind requests at this time, because our objective is for industry to bear the burden of this at the moment. If we, as we work through some of the proposals, come up with some, if there's access to crown land, things like that, we may want that conversation, but the intention is that industry would fund and resource and administer these initiatives. And finally, we're asking you to remove the bylaw related to wood burning appliances and the restrictions on installation in new homes. The reason we're asking for that, well, there's several reasons. One is we do not believe it does anything to improve air quality, but what it does do is send a message that wood burning appliances that are certified to, the top standards in Canada and the United States and across Europe and different places, are not compatible with GHG emissions or improving air quality, because and it's that issue that we're at issue with, that issue, not to use the word too much. So I'd like to leave some time for questions and additional comments for my colleagues, but we wanted to make sure that you heard directly from us. I will also say that as an industry, what we are hearing back from both residents of Comox and across the Comox Valley, is that we have a lot of support for the type of initiatives we are suggesting, and we plan to continue to bring that message to the public. And we appreciate your time. And I should have acknowledged at the beginning the Indigenous Comox First Nation, as well as where I'm calling from in Newfoundland with the Beothuk, the Innu, and the Inuit as well. So there, I'll turn it over now. I don't know if any of my colleagues have anything to add. I don't know if Laura, John, or Corey, you'd like to add something, or Jamie? No? Okay, well, we'll turn it over to questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff. Appreciate that. Any questions from council? Councillor Minions.
Thanks, Jeff. Has the society done education programs before, or is this something that's coming kind of out of the issue that's been talked about with air quality and GHG emissions? Have you guys done education programs as a society?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll let Laura and others weigh in. We've been doing this for a good part of 20, 30 years in different respects all across North America in various forms. Absolutely. And Laura, I don't know if you want to add a little bit to that.
We were involved in the Burn It Smart program that ran about 18 years ago now, and worked with Wet BC on that as well. And we've been involved with those programs across Canada, and then continuing at that effort even after the government shut that down.
Okay, thank you. It seems like the responsible burning and education seems to be one of the biggest challenges. So it's when it's been around and it's still not being taken up, it's interesting how we make that effective, or the education makes an impact. So it's good to know that it's been around. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Good evening.
You too.
All right, we'll move on to Shannon Jameson with, she's got some implications of short-term rentals for us. Shannon.
Hi, everyone. I do have a presentation, so I'm just going to try and share my screen with
Got
you.
it. Yep. It's
Is
there.
that showing up?
You bet.
Okay, perfecto. Okay, let me just make sure. Okay, wonderful. So good evening, everyone. I'm actually coming from Victoria, BC. My name is Shannon Jameson, and I'm a registered professional planner and also the principal of Third Space Planning. So this presentation is actually associated with a staff report on short-term rentals, which is later on in the agenda. So with my very brief time this evening, I'm going to discuss short-term rentals as well as the development of local government regulations. So Third Space Planning has actually become a leader in this particular area of work. We bring hands-on experience developing local short-term rental programs, relationships with key STR experts in both academia and the private sector, as well as a deep knowledge of regulatory and enforcement approaches across BC and Canada, which has all been consolidated into our award-winning STR regulatory toolkit. So tonight, I'd like to leave you with 5 key takeaways. First, short-term rentals are not new, but the online platforms like Airbnb are. Second, short-term rentals can bring both benefits and harms to local communities. Third, short-term rentals are rapidly growing and here to stay, even with a global pandemic. Fourth, local governments have a really key role to play in their regulation. And fifth, a broad range of short-term rental types can still be permitted without compromising housing availability and affordability. So first, short-term rentals are not new. People have been renting out their cottages and cabins for decades through classified ads, word of mouth, and online buy and sell sites. So the new component is the online platforms within the last decade, like Airbnb and VRBO. So these online platforms have made operating and staying in short-term rentals extremely easy and created a short-term rental market in most communities. So short-term rentals can bring both benefits and harms. The high-level benefits for STR include income generation for the operators, greater accommodation choice for travelers, efficient uses of spaces like a spare room, and can support the local tourism economy. But they can also bring with them harms. And so some of those high profile harms include decreased availability and affordability of housing for residents, especially when that housing is used solely for short-term rental. There's also the potential for community disruption. So an example would be large party houses, and some unfair advantages that short-term rental operators have. So for example, not being subjected to the same level of regulation or taxation as a traditional accommodation provider like a hotel is. So short-term rentals are rapidly growing, and most of that rapid growth is actually happening in smaller communities like the town of Comox. So particularly population centers under 50,000 have experienced the most annual growth, with rates of 42 to 44%. So the key takeaway here is that short-term rentals are not just a big city or resort community issue anymore. They're actually starting to become more and more challenging smaller rural communities. The next takeaway is that the most popular type of short-term rental are for entire homes. So this kind of reflects the demand for that amenity-rich accommodation, access to a kitchen or a backyard or multiple bedrooms. And that means that these units have been pulled away from or are otherwise not available as part of the long-term housing supply. So this is particularly true in small and rural communities. And then lastly, short-term rental data during the pandemic highlights the industry's resiliency. So even with extensive global travel restrictions, the total number of worldwide short-term rental listings actually grew by 2.5% from pre-pandemic levels. So this just shows that short-term rentals are here to stay. They are the new normal. So within the last 5 years, as the impacts of short-term rentals are becoming increasingly understood, many communities in BC and across Canada have begun exploring modern regulatory approaches to achieve local goals. So this can range from protecting housing for residents to ensuring the health and safety of guests. These include familiar names and destination communities like Tofino, Whistler, Victoria, and Vancouver, but also smaller communities like Fernie and Nelson, and even regional districts. And close by, both Cumberland and Courtenay are currently in the process of developing short-term rental regulations. So the takeaway here is that while regulating short-term rentals can seem daunting, there are plenty of established communities that we can look to for guidance. And although the federal and provincial governments have an important role to play, so the biggest being collecting taxes, there are decisions around the scale, the distribution, and the integration of short-term rentals into communities that are fundamentally going to be up to local governments. So I'd say no matter what your community priorities are, whether you want fewer short-term rentals, more short-term rentals, different types, regulations can provide consistency and clarity for the operators, for the platforms, for users, residents, and staff. So lastly, I just wanted to touch on one specific regulatory tool. It's called a principal residence requirement. Many local governments are using this to permit a broad range of short-term rentals that don't compromise housing for residents. So with the principal residence requirement, short-term rentals are only permitted in an operator's principal dwelling unit. So this is the place that you would call home the majority of time, where you would send your mail, the address listed on your driver's license. So this is just an example of a regulatory tool which would address Council's 2019 motion to report back on the impact of short-term rentals on the supply of affordable housing, including an allowance for rental of primary units. So as part of the development of a short-term rental regulation and enforcement program for Comox, this tool would be further explored for consideration. So lastly, there will be a staff report later in the agenda that describes a proposed approach for developing short-term rental regulations. Council can also download the short-term rental toolkit, which is a comprehensive guide for developing local regulations, or you can please contact me if you have any questions or want more information. So thank you so much for your time, and happy to answer any questions you have right now.
Thanks, Shannon. Does council have any questions?
I have a question, Mayor.
Okay, Councillor McKenna and then Minions.
Thanks for your presentation, Shannon. So I'm coming to you actually tonight from Nova Scotia. My daughter lives in Newfoundland, and we've had to resort actually to, because of a threat of eviction, we've actually had to resort to purchasing a home for her in Newfoundland. This really strikes home for me because housing in Comox, you know, I just left Comox and relocated here, and I thought it would be different here. It's not different. Across the country, the housing issue is extreme, and people can't find a place to live. My question, though, is really about, is there and I don't know if you can answer the question, but is there an affordable margin in the average Airbnb to take on more fees?
Yeah, actually, that's a good question. I think that would be a research question and definitely something to consider during that development of regulations. I mean, it's what a guest is willing to pay. And right now, because of the lack of regulation, compared to somebody like a hotel, short-term rentals are a lot cheaper. But there's certainly, the provinces are certainly taking a step forward and introducing new fees. And so there's been talk about adding something like an affordable housing fee on top of every single short-term rental booking. So that's kind of happening at a provincial level, not at a local level. But I think that there's certainly options that would raise the cost of renting a short-term rental to kind of compensate for that particular issue. So I don't know if that answers your question, but it's certainly something that could be looked into.
Yeah, I think it does, you know, answer my question. And I've used short-term rentals. I see the benefit of it. I also see the firsthand impact of its damage that can be done as well. It's a very complex issue for sure. Yeah, thanks for your report.
Councillor Minions.
Yeah, thanks, Shannon. It's nice to see what the best practice is and have it all kind of laid out in front of us. Obviously it makes sense to have Airbnb's best practice be in people's principal residences. And I'm not sure if I heard you correctly, but did you say there's an allowance for also a number of vacation rentals kind of in best practice that would not be in primary residences, that would be in households? I was surprised to hear that, but I might have heard it incorrectly. So where they're just standalone and would be taking away from the housing kind of inventory?
Yeah, thanks for your question. The best practice for communities that are prioritizing housing for residents is this principal residence tool. And so that would be only allowing short-term rental if it was a home for a permanent resident. So not what we would use in common language as a commercial short-term rental or one that is vacant most of the time. So the best practice in communities like Victoria, Vancouver, even Fernie, if your primary objective and goal is protecting housing for residents, it's really putting in that principal residence only requirement. And there's certainly many communities that are trying to strike the balance of allowing some types of more commercial short-term rental, and as well as trying to protect housing for residents. But sort of the data shows that if this is kind of the number one priority, it's putting in the principal residence requirement, which would sort of eliminate those standalone, exclusively used for short-term rental listings.
Okay, thank you. And so it sounds like if someone was traveling part of the year and coming back, or if it's still your primary residence, those would fall under available rentals since they're not taking away housing.
Yeah, so there's this gets into the really nerdy nitty-gritty, but so you can only kind of classify one of your properties as a principal residence, and so somebody would have to make a choice basically of what. So there's many examples. Somebody may have a vacation property in Comox and they can choose to designate that as their principal residence, and wherever their second residence would be could not be a principal residence. So the takeaway is you can own multiple properties, but you can only have one principal residence, and that would be the only one that you could short-term rental. So there's it gets really in the weeds, but you could technically have somebody that has it available for a large portion of the year because say they're somewhere else 6 months of the year, but it needs to be designated as sort of the main place where they're where they pay their income taxes, where they have their driver's license, where their mail comes to. That's kind of some of the thresholds that you would use to determine what a principal residence is or not.
Thank you, Shannon.
Thanks, and Councillor Bissinger.
Sure. Thanks for the presentation, Shannon. I guess question for you, like just looking on Air DNA, looks like Comox has 36 vacation rentals, of which 86% are like single family homes or entire home rented out. So I guess for that's like 0.5% of our housing in Comox. So sort of what's the threshold to have short-term rental regulations for a community? Like when do we start looking at it? And then secondly, like are we looking at, you know, regulating, but then also like taxing additionally, or having additional, you know, sewer costs, or having additional like bigger business license costs or anything of that sort? Is that all part of that you look at?
Yeah, good question. So I think that so AirDNA is a great point in time to check. It's highly variable, and as part of this project, we would do a bit more of a deep data dive to kind of show the fluctuation. So I've seen, even from some of the research I've done, up to 100 at a time in Comox. And so it's pretty seasonal. We're coming out of a pandemic. So I would say many communities, even smaller ones, kind of under 100 is actually still makes a pretty big dent in terms of what you're trying to do. And even if your council chooses to prioritize even just the unfair advantages that STR operators have. So even if that becomes the goal, you can put in some pretty simple, straightforward regulations, similar to how you regulate any business in the town of Comox. So even if that means just requiring a business license, there's kind of the gamut that you can go from putting in complicated and complex regulations to mainly just bringing them into a level of consistency that you do for any other business in the town of Comox. And that could be as simple as just a business license. And so that's something that I would work with staff and council on to kind of come up with that mix that you're looking for. It could be pretty straightforward and simple, and it could be more complicated and onerous. It's really what your community's priorities are.
Thank you, Councillor Swift.
Thanks, Shannon. I'm just wondering if you have a definition of what a short-term rental is.
I do. I can see it here. Let's see if I can pull up that slide quickly, and if I'm still sharing my screen. And I don't know if you guys can see, but this is the main one. So hopefully this is showing up. So basically it's a rental of a residential dwelling unit. So it can either be the whole unit or a room within. Any housing type. So it can be apartment, condo, carriage suite, garden suite, short period of time. So usually, typically it's about 3 or 4 days. That's kind of the average that people do. So a long weekend, mostly used by visitors or tourists. And usually there's not that in-person interaction that you would have at something like a bed and breakfast where you're greeted by someone. So there's the keys are hidden somewhere, or there's a keypad to get in. And then the big one is that it's facilitated by these platforms. So there's this designated website that you go to that you can search and browse for them. So that's kind of the complement that all goes in to kind of be classified as a short-term rental.
Thank you. I think I was mainly interested in the period of time. I believe we have a bylaw that suggests that you can't rent for less than 28 days. Am I correct, Martin?
In terms of, to meet the definition of a dwelling unit, it says that you can't rent less than 28 days. The second you start getting into a temporary accommodation like a motel or a hotel, it says you can't rent for more than 28 days. And then it has also a maximum over the year, right? So that 3 to 4 days would be consistent with what we think of as transient or sort of temporary accommodation.
All right, thanks. Any other questions? Seeing none, Shannon, as you mentioned, we will come back to this a little later. Appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda. So motion to bring them all in. What did I miss? Oh, sorry. Yeah, boy, I was trying to make this night go faster. All right, sorry. Yeah, so the minutes of the regular meeting of council, June 16th, be adopted.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Okay, carried, adopted. Thanks. Special council meeting minutes from July 6th for adoption.
Second.
All in favor? Okay, thanks. And we don't have any council meeting minutes or reports, so we will go on to the consent agenda.
Second.
All in favor? All right, anybody want to pull anything out? We'll need a motion, so Councilor Minions, and then you, yeah, sorry. It's been a month since we've been here together. So Councilor
nice that
Minions,
it's
go
not
ahead.
me.
Yeah, I'm remembering you.
I'll take it. I was just gonna pull out number 1 and number 3
1 and number 3.
regarding skate park.
Okay, and yeah, okay, so for discussion, 1 and 3.
Yeah, I know we have the request for proposal or whatever that was labeled as. I'm just wondering how shovel ready we would be for a skate park or a pump track, or if an application was to come forward, how ready we would be for that application.
So interestingly enough, there actually has been a grant opportunity that's been put out that we may be able to utilize for either a skate park or a pump track. So we've been doing some work to get the information that we need to submit for that grant application, which closes, I believe, next week. So we're able to pull these things together for grant applications. Now, the actual planning that's going to be required for the final locations and final designs may take a little bit longer, but we are able to be flexible and meet these grant applications. The EOI, the proponent to the EOI for the youth recreation facility has been decided upon, and we have a kickoff meeting with them on Monday. So that's going to start moving forward as well. So there's a little bit of putting the cart before the horse in our application for the skate park, but given the amount of funding that was there, that they would just be a win-win if we're able to get it. And if it's not, ends up not being the final desire out of this youth recreation EOI, then we've got an 80% or 90% funded project, and we'll have the funds to do something else.
That's great. Seems like there's about a dozen or so letters and emails coming across. So it's something the community is talking about. So that's great. Thanks.
And we will be coming to council in your August 11th meeting, looking for a council resolution to submit that grant.
Okay, thanks. So that encompasses 1 and 3 then, right? Councilor McGowan.
Thanks. Can I pull number 7 and number 10?
7 and 10. Okay, so go ahead.
I just wanted to ensure that we've touched base with everybody here. The Church Street Tap House, I'm sure, is trying, but I can see why people would be getting upset. And so I just wanted to follow up with that, see if we've contacted them, the tap house, and what we're doing moving forward with that.
Yeah, so for number 7, I personally went and spoke with what was it, Charles and Lorraine, and sat on their deck and talked about it and saw some of the cars that caused them some angst, doing U-turns, using their driveway. So the CIO and I have just kind of chatted over coffee about it, and I do think we need to move forward on something. What that something is, not sure. They had some suggestions you saw in one of their emails, so maybe we come bring that back at a later time and discuss it further. So, but as far as 10 goes, yeah.
Well, can I comment on 7?
Oh yeah, sorry, Pat. Go ahead.
Yeah, I really like some of those options that were presented, and I just think they're very realistic for that area. There is a lot of U-turning, a lot of crazy kind of maneuvering going on in that area, and maybe it would slow it down a little bit. I tried to look up the optical illusion stuff, but I couldn't figure that out.
Yeah. Okay, and for number 10, Stephanie?
Similar, wanting to follow up and see what's going on with bylaw, make sure that we're actually following up with the bylaws that we have and
Right.
Complaints. Having recently gotten a dog, I understand a little more how quickly they can take off. And
Well,
yeah.
hopefully our new dog park will alleviate some of these problems. I understand it's
Yeah.
coming soon, but CIO, you had your light on.
Yeah, so we've had a conversation with our bylaw and made it clear that Marina Park is an on-leash dog park. And that if people do have their dogs off leash, that we need to be moving forward either with education or enforcement. It's not always the right process to go forward and just ticket people for every rule that they break, but to try and to get in compliance through education, which is ongoing. And we're directing a bit more attention down to Marina Park to ensure that does remain an on-leash park in that area. In regards to there's a second part of my answer that slipped my mind, but when it comes to the dog park, sorry, can you say that? Oh, when it comes to the dog park, it is under construction. We hope that it will be up running hopefully in the next couple of weeks.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So do we have any others? Councilor Minions?
Yeah, just number 2 really quickly, the playground.
Okay.
Right. Yeah, I remember the second part of my answer. The other part of the question, or the other part of the letter was on Kai Bay and what we're doing in regards to dogs off leash in Kai Bay. And we don't actually have authority on the beach in Kai Bay to enforce dogs on leash, and we don't have any signs out there either. It's a provincially regulated area.
Good to know. Thank you.
Okay, Councilor Minions, number 2 you want to take out.
Yeah, just from Jesse Beauchamp on the playground at Mackenzie Park. I was just remembering back, I drove by that park and kind of took a very quick look, but at budget time, we kind of moved some of the parks out of budget because we thought we'd look at it kind of more comprehensively, because we may not want to be replacing all parks in certain areas, and kind of that was my memory on it, was that in the next year or 2, we would look at that more comprehensively versus like go to one park and say, yes, that park is old and needs replacing, but it's kind of a bigger picture as far as where we look at trends of where things are growing, is that instead of looking at each individual email that comes in on parks and where they're at, I thought Andrew Berger had maybe said one day it would be looked at in a little more of a comprehensive way. I don't know if my memory is correct on that.
I think that if my memory of the discussion around the parks was that one of the specific parks that was looked for upgrade, and I believe it's Kai Bay Park, council decided to defer because given the other recreation opportunities there and the current condition, it wasn't up for replacement. I don't recall us discussing pushing anything off to look at things in a more holistic way. Now, the condition of this park is something that we do condition assessments of all our parks every year, and then we'll make replacement recommendations on there. So we would take a look at this park at the end of this year as well, and if it falls into the need for replacement, it would be recommended. But there's no plan to hold off on replacement to maybe remove or reduce the number of parks in the town.
Okay, and so in response to that letter, we would let residents know that those annual condition reports are done, just so they're comfortable with that level of kind of checking for safety.
Yeah, I don't believe we've responded to this one yet, and we can include that in our response when it goes out.
Okay, thanks. Any further? All right, thanks. We'll move on. We do have 7 minutes to go, so I think we can do the strategic priorities and action items received from July 14th.
Second.
Any questions, comments? All in favor? Okay, the second one, unless there's going to be a lot of discussion on that, I think maybe we should hold off a little bit. So do we want to tackle DVP 21-5 in the next 5 minutes? Okay, sure. I wasn't sure if there's going to be. Right, you have to, yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we have a recommendation from the CAO that development variance permit DVP 21-5 be issued upon resolution of the outstanding item and subject to development variance permit. Good. All right, so any questions or comments on that?
Pretty straightforward.
None? All in favor? All right, that's carried. Derek and Harold, thanks for standing by, and you're off the hook now. So now we will need a motion to recess and move to public hearing.
Move.
Second.
All in favor? All right. And we'll be back in 5 minutes. Pat?
Yeah, is it the same link?
Good question. Same link? We're checking, Pat.
Yeah, no worries. I can just turn off my camera and mute and come back in 5.
We'll send you an email if there's a different link to join.
Okay, thanks.